Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Real estate experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today, I have the pleasure of having Ilana Weismark in the lab with us, which feels like we're completely overdue. So first of all, Ilana, welcome to the lab, as we call it. And it's such a pleasure to have you. Welcome. How's it going today?
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Awesome.
That's fantastic. So first of all, we gotta level the playing field here. We have some kind of really interesting connections. So before I make you an introduction, let's talk about our very interesting similarities. You're French like myself. Which was crazy because we found out when we started working together like midway. I'm like, no kidding.
So why are we even speaking English?
I know. Well, I was going to say we're going to release a second version in French for our French folks back home. That's for sure.
Oh, gosh.
Second connection. I know, right? That'll be a challenge for me too. I'm like, a podcast in French. But no, we definitely got to do that for the French culture. Second, you studied economics. I also studied economics. I didn't know that. You went to a school for that. Which was super interesting, English and economics. I found that fascinating. You're an Atlanta native, like myself. I'm in and out of state, but I'm doing real estate here in Atlanta. That's actually how we connected, and I had the pleasure of doing business with you on several projects. And last but not least, of course, we're both in the real estate space, but we operate in very different verticals, but we both need each other. So, First of all, welcome to the lab. You are the founder and owner of Oh La La Staging, which is of course Oh La La. What a wonderful name, by the way. And I have to just put it out there. You're accredited staging professional. You're such a joy to work with. You have a great team. You're as good as your team. And you've done over 500 homes here in Atlanta. So you have a lot of experience under your belt. And we can't wait to unfold really of how you got into this space. So this is what I wanted to ask you even offline. But I wanted to save it for the people. How did you fall into the staging business? Enlighten me, please.
So it all started, I was a teacher. I used to be a teacher. I grew up, I'll tell you the real background. I grew up in France.
Yes.
Decided I needed to perfect my English. So I moved to England. I lived 5 years in London, became a teacher. I was a French teacher over there. Then I decided to move to Israel, and I was a French teacher over there, and I met my husband over there. And then he said, hey, listen, how do you feel about coming back to the US? I was like, okay, let's do this. So I went back to the US with him. And I was a teacher for a few years, and I was always super, super creative, crazy ideas, completely out of the box. And of course, when you're in his classroom, it's very in the box. And I kept on having all these crazy ideas. And my husband, in parallel to this, was a real estate. He was a realtor, and he was flipping houses. And one day I said, honey, I'm going to stop teaching. I don't know what I'm going to do. I know I want to work with you, maybe not for you, but I'd like to work together. And so my first week off of work, he took me to one of his houses. He said, come and see some of my work. And I went, and I happened to walk in, and there was a team in there. It was the stagers. I had never seen stagers. I didn't know what they did. And I'm listening to them, and they're saying, oh, let's put the sofa over here. Let's put the beautiful whatever table over there. And I'm listening to them. And as we get back in the car, he said, what do you think of my house? And I said, it's awesome. And you just found yourself a new stager. And he was like, you're kidding. I was like, yeah, that's what I'm doing now. So that's how I got into staging.
The reason I love that, Lana, because it's such an embodiment of like what we believe. We believe that experiments are based on experience, right? So you have to first see it, touch it, feel it, and then you get a little bit of inspiration, and then you dive a little deeper and you go all in. So what's really interesting, I'm going to take it a few steps back because you're a teacher by trade. So let me ask you, what age group were you teaching, and were you able to bring some of that creativity to the classroom, or did you feel like there was more that you want to leave in there? Can you tell me?
No, I taught every grade from first grade all the way to graduating high school, all the way to seniors. So I taught all the grades, and I could connect with the kids at every age. With the little ones, you have to be more hands-on and more creative. That's where really I've started to find my creativity and my my desire to really use my hands and to put things together, always make it pretty. With the older kids, it was more like, relationship, and you get to know them, you bond with them, you're their ally. I'm still in touch with some of my students. They're now in their 30s, but I'm still in touch with some of them. Like, we had such a good connection. I loved teaching. I really did. And that's why I still today love to teach about staging. I love to teach about anything that I know, because it's so much fun to me to educate people on anything.
Absolutely. And actually, we were just talking offline that you actually are doing a teaching with, again, real estate professionals, because again, you work with realtors, you work with real estate investors. And so what you're doing right now, correct me if I'm wrong, is you're actually educating folks on how the benefits of working together. Is that what you're doing?
Yep. I'm getting together with another Atlanta stager. She focuses mostly on occupied staging. So she works mostly with sellers agents that deal with houses that are already occupied. And I focus on the vacant houses. And so we're super good friends. We have a great time together. And we decided that we could put a class together where we both show how to work with both of us. So with her, it's completely different from me. I come and I have a blank canvas. She's working with people's stuff. And so we talk about how to work with a stager, what to do, what not to do, the good, the bad, the ugly of staging and not staging, and the ROI, and how to educate sellers, all of those things that people need to know. It's a 1-hour class. It's jam-packed. It's super fun. It's awesome.
Absolutely. We'll make sure we touch a little bit more on that. I just wanted to connect the dots. So
sure.
Let's go back to the teaching, because I think the reason I'm touching on this for a little bit, Ilana, is that I truly believe our business is a reflection of who we are. Mm-hmm. And obviously I've got a chance to work with your team, and your business is just a wonderful business. I've recommended it to anybody, and I have. That's why I want to get to the root. So the teaching thing, I got to ask you, is there a favorite age group in there that you're like, ooh, I really like working? I know you talked a little bit about tapping into the creative side with the younger individuals, the younger students. Is that the fact, or is there another maybe age group that you find that's really fascinating?
Every age group is completely different. Now I teach adults, right? When I teach realtors and investors, I teach adults. It's all different. I think back in those days, teaching that middle school awkward stage, they don't know who they are. They don't know who to believe. Mom and dad are just losers, you know what I'm saying? And so there I was, and I was only like in my early 20s when I was teaching them. So I was super young. I was not much older than they were. I was maybe like 10 years older, but it's just that connection. I really always enjoyed that. I always, and I still, I just can't help myself. I like to pass on information. There's so many things I'm so passionate about, and I love to explain. I love to educate. I love to take people by their hands and really just show them how, to do it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so Ilana, tell me, because you talked about this kind of itch of like always wanting to be creative. Do you think for someone like you who's well established into your career and you transition, and I think it's important for all of us to hear it, because I think that is a true reality, how we're always reinventing ourselves. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that you're always had like a radar, you were kind of on the watch for something to channel your energy somewhere different? Or did you feel that you kind of just stumbled upon it? Like, were you seeking out a change when you were a teacher, or what was it?
I love change. Change is like my favorite thing. It's my favorite thing. I love it. I mean, I'm never scared of change. Yes. I always tell my husband, I'll change everything except for him and the kids. Like everything else I'll change all the time. But I don't know. I like to reinvent myself. I like to do things differently. I like to change my haircut. I've gone short, long, whatever, curly, straight. I don't know. I just like change. And so I found myself, I think I was itching for a change. I didn't know what the change was going to be, but I knew that I needed to do something different because I felt too stifled. I was teaching in a private school, so the parents had high demands, the school had high demands, and I just wanted to be my own boss. I don't know about you, Ruben, maybe that's another thing we have in common, but I'm a third child of 3. Are you a youngest child?
I'm in the middle. There's 4 of us. I'm second.
Oh, okay.
Middle.
Never mind.
Am I in middle? Does that count?
You're kind of middle.
Halfway there.
You're middle plus.
Ilana, are you a Gemini?
No, I'm Pisces. My birthday is next week.
Oh wow, no kidding. We'll have to remember
Yeah.
that. My
Yeah.
goodness. I was gonna say there's some energy here. I'm telling you, there's some wavelength. I was gonna say you gotta be a Gemini or something.
I have 2 Gemini kids, so if that
There you
counts,
go.
2 out of 3.
Absolutely.
So
That's
yeah, but it's just like I just needed to do something, and I guess I stumbled across it because my husband was in the field, and I never thought I would do this, but it worked out, and like I've been successful, I've grown, I've had to sort of evolve with it all, because you have to as an entrepreneur.
absolutely. And the beauty of it, you help others find success as well, myself included. You're right. You worked with the real estate development projects, a couple of them, and you helped us find success. So I want to get right into it. How important is it to stage a property, and why is it so significant?
Oh, where do I start?
Look at that alley oop, slam
It's
dunk.
it's
Take it home,
so
Ilana.
it's so important. Think about it. People are sitting at their computers. They're browsing through listings. If yours doesn't stand out in one way or another, it's over. They're not going to come and see your properties. And people nowadays, especially in COVID times, are not going to see 30 properties. They're going to shortlist to about 4 or 5 that they really want to go. And how do they shortlist? By price, number one, location, what the condition of the house is, all the terms of contract, etc. But the first thing they look at are those photos. And when you see vacant pictures, photographers are great these days, but they can really trick the eye with their wide angle lenses.
Mm.
And you're looking and you're like, I don't know how big this room is. Like, is it massive or is it small? And if they don't have a sense for it, like you and I have a sense, if you say it's a 1,200 square foot house, you and I know what size the 3 bedrooms are going to be.
Yeah.
Or if it's a 3,500 square foot house, you know that if there's whatever, only 4 or 5 bedrooms, you know that they're going to be pretty sizable. And so, but as a layperson who doesn't know, they're just looking online, they have no idea. And with that furniture on those photos, they can't understand the scale of the house, the scale of the rooms. They can't understand where they're going to place their stuff, and they just don't feel emotionally connected to the property. So to begin with, you have those photos, but then they enter the property and there's furniture. It's like in their mind, we're telling them a story, right? As a stager, I'm telling the buyer a story. This is where you're going to sit. This is where you're going to read your book. This is where you're going to sit and eat lunch. And look, there's bar stools, meaning there's an overhang to the island. Maybe people wouldn't notice there's one if there were no bar stools there. So as stagers, what we do is we control the buyer's eyes so that they look at what matters in the house. They understand the space for what it is. What's the purpose of this room? Is that the dining room? Yes, it's the dining room. Guess why? Because there's dining table and chairs. Yeah. But if there was nothing on that photo, or even in person, no chandelier or anything, they'd be like, well, I don't know. What room is this? How do we use this room? And the whole open floor plan that people love to implement these days it can bite you back when you come and you're like, oh, what is this room for? Yeah. What do I do here? Where do I put my stuff? So those are some of the reasons why we do that. But it's all about increasing the perceived value of the property. Mm-hmm. That perceived is really the key. Is you want to give the buyer the impression that the property is worth even more than it is, for its all the walls and the fixtures, but you want to give it even more of a perceived value.
Oh my gosh, you dropped so many gems that I want to unwrap. Oh my gosh, where do I start? So first of all, I love what you said about you and I might be familiar. I think what we're talking about here, if you're listening, it's the context of the content that you're looking at. And if you're a realtor, if you're like Ilana and you have just a golden eye and you can see everything, you're like myself, I've worked in space, and you're familiar with it. You're taking that for granted, because there's a lot of people where it's not their field, it's not their playing space, it's not their environment, it's not their home, I guess pun intended there, but I love how you said you're telling a story, because you have to help the person envision themselves in your home. And I just think that's just so, I love how you touched on that. And I think it's important to reiterate to the person that the average buyer is not necessarily doesn't have your eye, or understands real estate the way you do as a professional when you're preparing your property. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. And the last thing you want is for a buyer and their spouse to have gone to see, let's say they went on a marathon preview and they saw 10 houses in one day. You don't want your house to be the one at night where the wife says to her husband, honey, the one on Main Street, do you remember it? It didn't have a breakfast room, did it? Or did it? And then they're like, I don't remember, because it wasn't staged. If it was staged, you'd obviously know there were 2 dining spaces. If they take photos, you have evidence right there. But they're not savvy enough. And in this market, it's moving fast. You don't have time to hesitate. So it's really about just getting that, making it memorable, making it super clear to anyone what the spaces are, how much space there is for their furniture. If they look at a photo and it looks like you have a massive sectional and plenty of space around it, they know that room is massive. If there's no furniture, how do they know? They have no idea. On a photo especially, that's the first step to the house, is that photo.
So you talked about, first impression, and you talked about, especially during these times where, I think it's not only these times. When we say these times, it's literally March, 15th, 2021, as we're watching this or recording this, if you're listening to this. So obviously we've learned a lot about virtual living and doing business virtually. And that's for, again, the user. So as far as when, I'm really glad that you talked about the digital asset component, because I think that's what it is. We have these digital assets now that we're literally seeing before we see the physical asset. So talk about that a little bit. What is it that, if you're starting from ground zero, or if you're talking to me and I'm an investor and maybe I'm not even familiar with this concept, what are some of the critical kind of blocks that you're looking to build right away when you're looking to stage a home? What are some go-tos that you would say are blueprints that you go to as to this is a must-have?
For me, as a stager of what you should have in the house,
yes,
you definitely want to stage the main living spaces. We call them high impact areas. So you come into a house, let's say it has like a traditional layout in Marietta, right? You come in, there's an office to your right, there's a formal living to your left, you keep going, there's a formal dining, kitchen, family room, little hall powder room. You want to stage all of those areas because you want to make sure that the buyers don't pass by and think like, oh, I wonder what I would do here. It's empty. That's weird. What is that? What is that room anyway? In a general, in a little ranch, like say a Decatur ranch or a small town little ranch, you'd want to make sure that you define a living space, a dining space, kitchen, and if there's a breakfast area, you want to define that, and then the master bedroom and the master bath. There's no real necessity to stage any other rooms than those. The only one now that I add, and I highly recommend adding, is the office, because people really need to understand where they might be able to do their work, because times have changed. People work so much more from home now. And so highlighting an office space, even if it's just a secondary bedroom that you turn into an office, it's that little edge that you get on other houses, because now there's no room for imagination. You've created the space for people.
Yeah, I love that, because again, it's about adapting. I think a lot, that's probably one of the words that have been key in anybody's business, is how are you adapting to the way the marketplace is changing? And that's super important to do that, right? You talked about the virtual experience. You talked about people working from home now. There's a large amount of companies now who are having their folks work from home. So
that's right.
It's funny because we're in this space in short-term rentals, and it's one of the things you got to highlight is there's an office space, because you're catering to the story of the person who's going to stay there, which you've highlighted before.
That's right.
That's great,
Exactly.
Ilana. Great to hear you guys are adapting. So let's talk about the oh la la effect. So staging, not all stagers are created equal, of course not. That's why we have you here in the lab. So
thank you.
For oh la la staging, let's talk about behind the process. Like, I was fascinated by, the even coming on site when projects are are about to be complete, when the team, the de-staging was incredible. I couldn't believe how quickly. Okay, what's the magic behind this formula? How long did it take to master? I mean, walk me through the I guess the trials, the tribulations. Like, how do we get to where we are now? This oh la la effect.
Oh gosh. Okay. You know, it all starts from the beginning with getting a really good idea of what the space requires. And for me, you know, back in the day, I would come into a space and I'd stand there and be like, oh gosh, what do I do now? You know, what am I going to do? How am I going to play with this space? And figuring out, okay, I'm going to need a sofa. I'm going to need a couple of side tables. I'm going to need a rug. And there's all the main items. So the one thing that I worked on, I mean, I've been doing this for nearly 9 years. And so it's working on systems. And I'm sure you're a huge fan of systems, because if you don't have systems, it's over. And in this business, with staging, if you don't have systems, you're lost. It's over. There are a million things to remember. I mean, think about it. I come into a room and I look around and I'm like, okay, sofa, coffee table, rug, 2 chairs, maybe only 1 chair, and a side table, it's a small space. Okay. Items on the coffee table, items on this side table. All right, next, dining, and I need art. Then dining room. Does it require a massive table? Is it a smaller table? Is it for 6 people, 8 people? How big is this house? How many bedrooms are there? Do we have a 4 people table in a 7 people house? No, we have a much larger dining table if we can, because you have to you have to show who lives in the space, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, dining, what's going to be on that centerpiece? What art are we putting? Go to the kitchen. How much countertops are there? What are we placing there? And everything is about catching that buyer's eye to show we don't want to cram the space. I'm not selling my ooh la la furniture and accessories. I'm displaying them. I'm not trying to sell them. If somebody wants to buy them, fantastic. But that's not the point of me placing them there.
And honestly, you're doing such a fascinating job that I get asked that question all the time. Will the furniture be included? I'm like, staging.
It's not included, but they're welcome to talk to me about purchasing it.
Yeah.
But you're right. And so, you know, every space, even the bedroom, think about it. Headboard, bed skirt. Can't forget that bed skirt, otherwise you have a real problem. Bedding, pillows, how many pillow inserts, how many decorative pillows? Does the bedroom need a chair or not? 2 chairs, a dresser. How much art? Are we putting a lamp? Do we have a bulb for the lamp?
Gosh.
Yes,
okay. So how did you even take us a step? Like, that sounds overwhelming already.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, like, this is for the Ilanas out there in the world who are like, oh my gosh, I want to be just like Ilana. How do I get started? If I wanted to pursue, what would be ground zero? Do I start establishing relationships with vendors? Are you purchasing this? Do I find a storage? Like, what comes first? I mean, there's so many pieces, and we haven't even gotten to the house yet. I'm just talking logistics.
I know, it's so many pieces. If anybody here is thinking about becoming a stager, the first question I would urge you to ask yourself is, do you want to carry inventory, or would you rather not? That's the first thing, because it is a slippery slope and it's a very expensive business. Because all those things, they cost money, all the breakage, all the, you know, the revolving door of things. Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, it gets damaged all the time. And so that's the first question. But for me, it made sense to start with inventory because I had a husband that was feeding me projects. I studied to become a stager, and 3 weeks later, he threw me in my first vacant home. Wow. It was like, I was like, okay, I just gotta learn. Just throw me in the water. I'll learn to swim. You gotta do it sometimes, right?
The best way to learn. You'll never.
That's the best way to do it. Correct. That's the best way to do it. And so there I was, threw myself in. Now, am I proud of those first jobs? I I cringe when I look at them. I'm like, oh, can't believe somebody paid me for this.
That's called evolution, though. That's important,
Yes.
because and that's important also, I think, for our listeners to start, because sometimes there's the analysis paralysis, but your first version is, at the level that you're at, is never going to look anywhere close to the final version. But it's that first brick that you lay that's so important.
It's so true.
So that's good for you for taking that on. Yeah.
Thank you. You just throw yourself in and you hope for the best. And I did that one time. So I had purchased some furniture, put it in one house. I was like, great, got my first staging under my belt. And then my husband turns around and says, I have another one for you in about 3-4 weeks. And I'm like, how do I do this? And so I had to buy another set of another house worth of stuff. So it's again, purchase everything. But then house A moved into house C, and you kind of move on. And as you become more profitable, you start purchasing more furniture. It becomes better quality. It's all a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then you arrive at where I am. And it's not a massive company I have, but I've got about 20 houses out right now, and a 2,000 square foot warehouse. I have competitors with 10,000 square foot warehouses. They have massive operations. It's not really my goal. It's never been my goal to have that type of operation. I like my little mom and pop kind of thing.
And I think you have a nice personal touch to it as well, which I think is really what we're looking for as a partner or user consumer.
I appreciate that. That's true. It's true. And so, so that's how you get started, and it's like one brick at a time, and you just keep going and keep, like you said, you keep adapting and evolving, and you keep growing. And something that you were okay with at the beginning, 6 months later, like, okay, I need to retire that piece. It's enough. I need to start using better stuff. And then you move. And there's some situations where you get into trouble, and then you get back on your feet, and you keep going. And it's like, you just learn. You have to learn. As an entrepreneur, you don't have a choice.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about the horror stories in a little bit, but I want to just get to and the reason that I think this is so important is I always say that people can't do business with you if they don't understand how you do business. And I think, it's just like any business, right? If just understanding the process of what it takes, and for you to realize, oh my gosh, it makes sense. This is why I'm paying this person, because this is the kind of stuff that I don't want to go through, or that I shouldn't be going through, or that I should consider going, outsourcing out because of what it can bring to me at the end goal. So I believe in working with experts. And so that's the reason why I'm digging a little bit deeper. So as far as the furniture, I'm curious, how do you source the furniture? Because you talk about this piece is new, or this piece is outdated. Like, are you staying with the relevant trends, and where are you getting it? Are you getting it at your local retail, or are you getting it wholesale? I'm very curious about that process.
So when I first started, do you want the truth, the real truth? I threw a post on Facebook and I said, guys, I'm starting a staging business. Do you have furniture to give away?
Love it. Raw, keeping it raw.
And people threw their biggest trash at me, their old this and their old that. And you know what? I took it. Because what I did is, at the time, I still had some time. And because I was so creative, I refinished chairs. I repainted tables. I sanded and stained stuff. I went crazy. I built ottomans. I still have pieces now that I use currently in my inventory that I've made with my own hands, wooden headboards and all sorts of crazy stuff that looks fantastic. People always compliment me on that. And it's stuff I actually made. But that's how I first started. And then, the mistake I made at the beginning is I bought anything I saw that looked like it was a good price. And the problem with that is nothing is matching anything. So you have a bunch of mismatched stuff and you never put it to use. And so what I realized very early on, and that's a real nugget there for people who are wanting to become stagers, is you need to always purchase something with a purpose. You can't just buy it in a vacuum. So don't go buy a sofa. And then you're like, okay, well, what do I do with that sofa? It has, in your mind, it has to, first of all, fit in a specific room. Because if you buy it too big, then you've just spent all those hundreds of dollars and you can't use it. You have to go buy another one. So you need to be very cautious. What type of room is this? What kind of sofa does it require? What size? Now I'm going to get that. And I'm going to get the coffee table that's going to go with it and the rug that's going to go with it. And all the style goes together. You do have to have an eye for those things. You do have to have a sense. You don't have to be formally trained. I'm not an interior designer. I'm just me. I just have an eye, for the things that go together and don't. And I sort of put it, and it becomes in my mind. I can sort of imagine it. For some people, it's impossible. But for others, they can just see it. Oh, that table would be so great with those chairs. And this rug would be so nice with this piece of art. And it's like, to me, it's obvious. To others, it's not.
Yeah.
And so, I go to some wholesalers. I have access to some wholesaler, but the truth is I often go on Wayfair, or I'll even go on Amazon and buy stuff on Amazon in a pinch. 2 days later, it arrives at my door. Yeah. I'm not someone that buys huge quantities at a time, because I'm keeping my operation small, and I still want my items to be unique. I don't want 15 of the same stuff. I want each house to look different, but to have its own little tone to it. Little textures are different and stuff like that. So that's how I work. And so I might be at the store and be like, oh my gosh, these chairs are perfect for that house. And I'll buy them.
That's okay. So first of all, thank you for showing us how you think. And when you said 20 houses, I'm just trying to think of, and you talked about not buying things in a vacuum. Do you then group items together where, okay, this always goes very well together? Because I'm trying to think of a way you kind of map this in your mind. In that, I mean, we talked about before we're offline of how many tabs you have open, and I'm like when it comes to, I'm a tabs hoarder. But I mean, I can imagine like what your brain is like. Do you get good sleep? Like, are we good?
So that's a good question. At the beginning of my career, I remember waking up and being like, do I have a table for that? Literally.
The eyebrow raise.
Like I'm like in the middle of the night, I'm like, oh yeah, I do have. Okay, I can go back to sleep. But I would give myself heart attacks, because I'd be like, oh, tomorrow I don't have a dining table. But it's you grow into it. It's a stressful business. Don't get me wrong, it is stressful, because when you arrive at that house, if you're missing those pieces and the realtor says to you, oh, you're good to go, and at 3:00 we have photos, you're like, go quickly, figure it out, replace, grab, whatever. Right. But yeah, but to answer your question regarding designs, there's some pieces that go nicely together. But what I try to do is I try to buy things that are very, very versatile. I don't get myself stuck in a corner. Like I don't generally stage super modern places, because I don't want to be in the super modern realm.
Oh. So what would you say that's so interesting. There's like niches within niches. My gosh.
Oh yeah.
So what would you call your type of staging? I don't even think I realized.
It's contemporary, transitional, but I don't get caught in those corners. And actually that leads me to something else that is important to say. Sometimes I'll get a phone call from an agent or from an investor, and they say, I have this house, it's French, modern, chic farmhouse. And I'm like, it's what? I'm like, okay, you're going to have to show me photos of exactly what you're looking for, because what you see as French chic and what I see as French chic or farmhouse could be completely different. So it's important when you define, what I'm talking about, when Absolutely. They come at you and they've got all these definitions, but you don't know what they mean. And what you mean and what I mean when it comes to design may not be the same thing. And so you need to be very specific and say, this is what we're looking for, and these are the pieces we're looking for. Do you have them or not? And I'll say yes or no. I'll be very honest. I'm not going to take on a job that I don't think I want to handle. But so when somebody calls me and says, I have this super modern penthouse, downtown Buckhead, I'll probably pass it along to someone else, because to me, that's furniture I don't really want to invest into.
That's so interesting. Yeah. So one thing I want to make sure that doesn't slip through the cracks, and there's so many things when you're speaking, I'm like, oh gosh, I want to ask her this and I don't want to interrupt you. You talked about interior designer. You're not an interior designer, but have you worked with interior designers?
No. Interior designers, and home stagers are two completely different breeds.
That's going to be my next question. Tell us the difference. Tell us to the listeners, because we might put you in a box, and that's not what we want. We want to educate our listeners. What is the difference?
You would go to an interior designer to redo your property, to come up with ideas for what you like. Whatever you like is what the interior designer is going to do. So if you want to revamp your house and turn it into a specific way, depending on your taste, you'd go to an interior designer. And they would say, Ruben, do you like pink or do you prefer orange? Do you like fluffy or do you like bare? Do you like this or do you like that? And they'll go and follow your lead. As a stager, I don't pay or very little attention to what the agent or the seller are asking for their property. I pay attention to what the buyers are going to be wanting. And that is something that a lot of agents and sometimes sometimes investors have a hard time with, because their house, their property is their baby. They want it the way they want it. And they really want it to be this, and that. And we can't do that. If someone said to me, I love greenery. I want greenery in every room, on every surface. I want it on the corner of the rooms. I want it on the tabletops. And I'd be like, okay, well, I can't do that, because what is it going to do? It's going to distract the buyers. The buyers are going to come through and they're going to say, oh my God, is this person obsessed with greenery? They're not going to look at the property, right? Mm-hmm. And so my job is not to do that. My job is to be pretty firm and to say, listen, to an extent, I can accommodate and put a few pieces of greenery, but overall, we're trying to not distract the buyers. We want the buyer to have a very crystal clear idea of what's for sale, which is not the greenery, it's the house. And so that's a very fine line, very fine line. It doesn't mean to say that an interior designer is not going to do a good staging job, but there is a difference. And generally, in my experience, people who are interior designers and become home stagers tend to overstuff their houses. They over decorate. Whereas as a stager, I back away from all of that. And I'm like, okay, where is the photographer going to stand when they take this picture? Boom, that's where I want art. Where are they going to do this or that? That's where I want to have this plant. Where is the door to the outside? That's where I want to have the tree. Because greenery, like we're looking outside, we're getting the eye over there. So there's a science to all of that madness. And it just makes perfect sense. And that's why as stagers, we've been trained to just be very minimal in the amount of items we use, to be just enough so that we can show each room for what it is without overwhelming the buyer's eye.
Wow. I am so glad I asked that, because you just gave me so much enlightenment, and I know that our listeners are going like, wow, that now we know why you're so important and the difference, because I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And I think you opened up, earlier, if we were paying attention, you said a keyword is the perceived value of the property which you're trying to sell as it relates to the marketplace. So let's talk about the marketplace. I know you talked about briefly the having office space is key now. What are some best practice, tactical, advice that you can give to those who are in the business of selling homes and getting people to buy their homes? What are some best practices that, one should have if they're working with you? What is it that you would offer them and encourage them to have in their homes at this time?
The most important things are showing where a home office would be. Another really key element nowadays is creating as much natural light as is humanly possible. Because again, people are a lot more inside their houses. You're at your desk for hours and hours, and it's nice to have some natural light coming in. So, make sure your window coverings let in enough light. If you're flipping a house and you want to put it for sale, don't put anything on the windows. Like, show all that light coming in, because it really makes it a very high, selling point. Another thing to think about is the outdoor an outdoor entertainment area, because people don't want their friends to come inside the house, and hey, let's have a fire pit and let's have an outdoor entertainment area. Those are big things. But when you come to the nitty gritty of what's happening in the house, the most important things very often go uncared for and unnoticed. It's like, are all your doors closing and opening smoothly, starting with the front door? Because when you're at that front door and you've got the agent, and you get the agent with their clients, and everybody's like sort of eager to get in, and the key is catching and it's not opening. Oh, maybe it's this way. No, maybe it's that way. And they're fiddling with it. What's happening in the buyer's mind? They're thinking to themselves, what else did they not take care of in this property? What else? Is the HVAC system bad? Was it, is the roof in good shape? Cut corners? Yeah. And so that's your first thing. Do all your switches turn on lights where they're supposed to be turning on the lights? Or are you searching? Oh, maybe it's this one. Nope, maybe it's that one. Oh, this one goes up this way. This one goes down. You know what I'm talking about? But everything is completely wonky. And so here you have to make sure all those things are straight. Do your cabinets open and close really well? Do they all have pulls? It's simple. It's so obvious, and yet it gets untaken care of all the time. And it's maddening to me, because if you're going to be putting a house on the market in a city like Atlanta, where there's multiple offer situations, a really hot market, you want to stand out, but for the right reasons, right? So you don't want to stand out because you're like, oh, no, there's bars on the windows don't open and close, those types of details.
Wow, thank you for that. That's so important. I think that it's in the details, right? But at the same time, it's what you talked about, the curb appeal and everything from beginning to end. So let's wrap up the all-ala effect and bring it all together, because I think we've covered a few bits and pieces, but I want to bring this full circle. So, there's a vacant property. What is the experience working with you like? I know you explained it to me very well when we started working together, and I didn't even know that, you'd have someone come on, have a look. Can you describe at a high level the experience you would give someone who's listening out there who's like, okay, what is it like to actually work with someone like you, a stager? What's the process?
Sure. So I actually, I work slightly differently from other stagers. I'm able to give a quote right there and then. When someone calls me, they tell me the price of the list price of the house. They tell me which rooms they want to stage. And I'm able to, give them a quote, regardless of the house, regardless of where it is, regardless of, what the access is to the property, except for condos, they're slightly more expensive. But once I send a contract out to signature, and I receive it back signed, is when I get the process going. And the reason I do this is because I used to waste a lot of time driving all around Atlanta, giving quotes, and only to have nothing to show for. It was very, very ineffective for me, a massive waste of my very, very precious time. I have 3 children. I gotta run, I'm running a household, I'm running a business. I don't have time to waste going to see a property for no reason. So now I send a contract. When it's signed, it's my go ahead. I ask for a code to enter. I ask for the exact rooms to stage. And that's an important one. Be very precise as to which exact spaces you want staged, because those are the spaces we're going to stage. If you forget to tell us about something, we're not going to stage it. So make sure that and we're also not going to charge you for it, but we just need to know exactly which rooms to stage. And then someone from the team goes on to the property. We walk in, we take photos, we take notes, and we list. We have a list, a checklist, and we list exactly what we're going to need. We generally bring very few extras, but here and there we try to just have some options. But whatever we eyeball that day is what's going to come in. So if we estimate it to be big or small, or whatever size dining table, how many chairs, how many people can this living room seat, how many people can the family room seat, and whatever, all those questions we ask ourselves. And sometimes the agent or the seller like to be on site when we do this. I have a really hard time focusing. Like, I need to really be looking at the space, feel it. And when someone is like, oh, and so how long have you been doing this for? They totally distract me. And I've got those 19 tabs in my head, and I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I gotta focus.
Are you going in with is this?
I have a checklist. I'm walking around and I have a checklist. I take photos from all four corners of each room. So I know where the windows are. I know where the walls are. I know where the doorways are. And the most important thing for me is to come up with just enough furniture that I don't cram the spaces, but I create a walkway for people. It needs to be fluid. They can't get stopped by a piece of furniture. They can't have to avoid something because it's not their house. They're not familiar with the house. So you don't want them tripping. So we go with, one of us goes to take photos, take pictures, take notes. And then the process starts. We share files with each other on the team. One person selects the furniture from the software. We have a software with all of my furniture listed on it. So it's going to be this chair, these 6 chairs, this table, this rug, this, and it's labeled. And so now we have a file with all the photos of photos of the items that are going into this house. And we book the movers, and the person who goes to the warehouse to select the decor and the art and the rugs has colored tape. Each house has a different color because sometimes we'll select for 3 houses in one day. So that person goes highly focused. I mean, that is you have no idea how much brain power it takes to select for a house. Like, it seems easy. We make it seem easy.
You make it seem easy. I can imagine it's not.
It is the hardest on the brain. It's the hardest thing. And so you take that, let's say this is the red house at Howard Street, red house, boom, I'm going to use this chair. I'm going to use this. We label everything. Wow. Everything gets labeled. We create bins of accessories. These are kitchen and living room items. These are dining room items. These are master bedroom items. These are all bathroom items. And on staging day, we say hi to the movers. They come, they load the truck, and we make our way over to the house. We arrive at the house, they unload the truck. We start opening. We start setting everything up. They taking out the furniture. We setting everything up, and make the bed, steam the bed, hang the art, put up the shower curtain. It falls, put it back up again. It falls, put it back up again. It doesn't fall anymore. Sometimes it still falls. But you basically go from room to room and you make sure it's completely perfect. And at the end, remove everything, take pictures, our own pictures, so we know what's there, and we leave. And the most important thing of all of this is that the photographer, the official photographer, needs to be scheduled to come directly after us with no time in between with anyone inside. In other words, if I stage on a Tuesday afternoon and photos are Wednesday afternoon for one reason or another, no one should be allowed on site because things are going to get moved.
Yes.
Things are going to get ruined, and it's not going to look the same way anymore. And then the photos are ruined.
Yeah, and I want to preface that you take pride in that, and I had firsthand experience where now I get the full story because this is the experience that you're creating with your expertise in the marketplace, and anything that gets moved reflects on you. And I experienced that. Of course, we know our project was a little bit bumpy in that sense. Yes. Because we're kind of
you were learning.
You were learning, and I think our sellers were learning too of how to. The best way to work with a professional stager like yourself and your team. So, and key things that I didn't even catch, you're very detailed. And I think that's a great reassurance that, I did appreciate that, wow, I didn't even notice that. And someone did move it. Yes. But it's, notice because you know exactly what the user experience needs to be.
Correct. And when they walk through and they're like, I wonder why there are so many items on this table and none here, it's distracting. It's completely distracting. So yeah, everything has its place. There's a rule for everything, the reason it's there, how it's set up, how it's going to look, and it's all made for those photos. So I love working with good high-level photographers that know exactly what they're doing, because I know they're going to make my work look even better.
I love that. I love that. So keeping it real segment here, right before we wrap up. It's just fascinating to see it all come together, and I think it's really cool to see. I mean, in every industry, there's just the process behind things. That's why I'm really always intrigued by the process, and I just think it's fascinating. But I think again, the experiences are fun too. So, is there a horror story that you can think of that's occurred that you want to share with us? Because I think it's very humbling, and I think it's good for us to get good perspective what happens behind closed doors.
Yeah, I mean, I was about probably a year or so in the business, and I was still, dabbling with some good quality furniture, some not so great. And I staged this house, and I'll never forget. I was in the car with my kids, and I get this phone call from an irate seller, and he goes, "This looks horrible," and he's swearing and he's using horrible terms. And I got my kids in the car, and I'm like, "Oh my God." And he was like, "This is terrible." And it was lovely looking, but he just hated all of it. And he said, "You're going to come tomorrow. You're going to take it all out. And I don't want to ever hear about you anymore." And it was one of those moments, Ruben, where you really second guess yourself, and you sort of look at yourself and you're like, is this the right route for me? Maybe I should never have gone into this business to begin with. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I'm not good enough. Like, I just immediate, self-talk that just gets you down in the gutters. And I looked at my husband and I said, I have two choices. I can either exit the business completely and be done with it, and I give up. And he looks at me and he says, "What? You give up? Not a chance." He said, "How about you take some of your savings from the business, go buy a few new items, just buy a few new things, revamp your inventory a little bit, you'll feel a whole lot better." So that's what I did. I went and I replaced a few things. I curbed a bunch of things that didn't work, that were not good enough, curbed them, and the rest is history. I just sort of grew from it instead of, giving up. It's hard, it takes a toll on your confidence, and then you're like, oh my gosh, how am I ever gonna have the confidence to do this properly if I always think that I'm gonna get caught,
Yeah.
But in the end, it sort of worked itself out, and I've continued to have situations where, there's sometimes a piece of furniture that maybe it was used one time too many. It's like it's getting a little dinged up, it's getting a little whatever, but we're under a time constraint. We don't have time to replace it. Okay, well, let's use it one more time, and after that, we'll get rid of it. Well, that one time, maybe that seller might say, "Hey, I really don't like that piece. Can you replace it?" Sure, replace it. And we expect it, but sometimes, it's all a matter of making the most of the time you have to make something happen. And I always have to remind myself, it's not about the stuff. It's never been about my stuff. It's always about the house. And so, not to get caught up in these kind of question marks and doubts.
Well, first of all,
pretty rough.
And good for you for overcoming it. But first of all, as well, that's a hell of a husband, because I think we all need that in our circle to reinforcement and positivity. So that's great. And then second of all, I guess, was that in the earlier stages in your career?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, because I think in anything that we do, we're always going to face a little bit of adversity. And I think whenever you get knocked down and you feel like, man, maybe this isn't for me, is when you're actually that much closer. Right.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
Look now, we have the finished product. We have it here. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So for this last segment, the invested talent segment. You've obviously invested in yourself. You invested in your team, even with contractors, staging, the whole 9 yards. What do you think your core competency when it comes to, making all this happen for you? What do you think that is?
For me to achieve this success
and being able to bring all these people together and bring all this project together, what do you think is that one thing that that's it right there that allows me? What would you think if you're reflecting on it?
I'm a big believer in energy. I feel like you attract who you are, and you attract the people that you're going to work with and in your circle. And sometimes you attract not good ones, but even that story I just shared, it was a good thing for me to attract it because it taught me some lessons. And by learning those lessons, I was able to grow. If it was always easy, you'd never grow, right? You'd just always stay so stagnant. There'd be no progression. But because there has to be some challenges, that's when you grow. And I really, the people that work with me, we all bond energetically and we all really like each other. I attract the investors and agents I want to work with, and they attract me, and we kind of work together, and it works. And if it doesn't work, we move on. And again, they've taught me a lesson, and it carry on. But generally, that's, to me, it's the secret. Is I never take myself too seriously. I make a lot of mistakes, but I'm someone that will. I have very little ego, and my coworkers and my family and anyone that works with me knows that about me. And I just don't have a problem apologizing and saying, this is not how I should have done this. I made a mistake. Let me fix it. And I don't know everything. And the people I hire are much better designers than I am. And I have no problem saying that. I hire them. I bring on good people. And that's what makes my operation work really well.
I love that. Actually, it's funny that you say that, because I think we just had a post go out today or I think Steve Jobs has said this. It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do. And
right.
Just your core of being able to have people who are better than you in your circle is what you want to do.
Yes, it makes all the sense in the world. I don't have a problem.
Yes,
absolutely. Put your ego aside. It doesn't matter. What matters is serving as many clients as possible in the best way possible. Reshma, my number one rock star stager, she often pauses and goes, boss, that doesn't make much sense. We need to do it this way and that. And I'm like, you go for it. You just do it. Yeah.
That's a great culture right there. Lastly, this podcast is brought to you by Invested Talent, which is a sister company. And you talked about digital assets, we talked about content. Has social media played a role in any way in the in your business as of right now it's March 2021? Has that attributed to some of the success down the road? And
Absolutely.
How so?
We on Facebook and Instagram, the two very different platforms. We also on LinkedIn. Instagram is so pretty. Like this is such a pretty business, right? I mean, you can show so many pretty rooms and differences between before and afters, and really show that off. I think Instagram is definitely very impactful for that. But Facebook also, I guess Facebook is more like family and friends sort of cheering me on, saying, gosh, I've watched you from the beginning and this is so cool. Just the other day, someone contacted me and says, you're rocking it on social. And I was like, well, thank you, and they're like, I was there when, I knew you when. And I was like, I know you did. And so, every little way that I can get the Ooh La La brand out with my colors and my logo and the style is just a great way. Any Google searches, a lot of people find me on Google, and it's just, any way that I can be memorable, that hence the name Ooh La La, to make sure that people hear it and they're like, I remember that sounds familiar,
Absolutely. We won't be able to forget that. And lastly, do you have any, I forgot to ask you this actually, is there any colors that you feel like are really in the marketplace that people can be like, yeah, this is a color right now that's winning, or a type of furniture? Do you want to just leave us one more gem? Is there anything that stands out in your mind? I know you see a lot of inventory and you see a lot in the marketplace. Is there anything that jumps out at you?
I think that the key to me is to have mostly a very neutral look with some pops of colors. You don't want to go too crazy. Right? Yeah. You don't want to go too crazy. And one thing is for sure is you want your colors and the crazier accents to be movable in the house. If it's on a wall, it's on the wall, right? So if it's an accent wall, you want to go with a color that's really the color of the year. Or, back a couple of years ago, you had the Sherwin-Williams navel. What a gorgeous color. I still see it sometimes with some gold accents. It's so pretty. Now you have the Benjamin Moore gray and yellow that are going together. I try again not to get too caught up in those things, because I don't want my houses to all look the same. I just have some pieces that I really like. So I have an emerald color bench that's so rich and velvety, and it's so gorgeous. And I use that in some houses, and some other houses will call for more of a blue, velvety kind of sectional. And others, it's more like gray and whites and, nice, classy colors.
Absolutely.
Just classy colors.
That's great. Oh, wow. You have so much knowledge. I could just see it just pouring out. It's so refreshing. Well, listen, this was fantastic. I definitely want to give a big plug to what you mentioned earlier to some of our listeners. It's the event that you're doing with Michelle Yekel.
Yep.
Yekel? Is it Yekel?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Confessions of Two Home Stagers, everything you've always wanted to know about home staging, but never knew who to ask. And now we have Ilana here, Weismark, in the lab with us. You know where you can find her. We'll include that in the show notes, but where else can people find out more about what you're doing at Olala Staging and even about the event?
So my website is the best place to go, ulalahomestaging.com, all in one word. You can find me on Instagram, again, Ulala Homestaging, Facebook, Ulala Homestaging. I'm everywhere, same name, easy to find. You can give me a call. I'm sure you will share my phone number, and just anyone that wants to ask me any questions regarding staging or how to work with a stager and what's best practices, feel free to call me. Feel free to attend one of our monthly classes that you just mentioned, Confessions of Two Home Stagers. We're offering this once a month on the third Friday of every month, I believe. And just come attend online. It's super easy. Buy your ticket, attend. Be prepared to take a multitude of notes. Be prepared to have a bunch of giggles, because Michelle and I we're the kind of kids that could never be in school together. We like that kind of teacher, but we have such a great time, and we both have together. I think it comes to 23 years of experience in the staging field. So we really know. We've gone through all of it. We've seen it all, and we give tons of great tips and advice. We share about how to work with us, how to make it all happen.
Well, I can't, thank you enough for sharing that with our listeners. And I can't tell the listeners enough of how they need to tap into your world. I've tapped into Ilana's world, and she's been extremely helpful for real estate development projects here in Atlanta. From beginning to end, she was involved and helped us sell, which is the most important thing. But most importantly, it was also the connection and relationship I was able to make with her team. And I do business out of state. So I actually was never on site. And I knew that I could have this taken care of because I was working with professionals who cared just as much about my properties as I did.
That's right.
Definitely plug in. And Ilana, just like that, thank you so much for stepping into the lab. And just like that, we are out.